Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much to Bela and Ines for inviting me to this conference, which is really exciting. Thanks also to Gabi Weyers, who is, I think, some kind of backstage organizer here also. These were two very exciting lectures already, and I don't know if I can add a lot to this anymore, because I think both of you brought up a lot of interesting questions, which we probably will discuss afterwards. What I'm going to show you, or what I'm going to talk about today, is about a project, one specific project I did, you mentioned it, I did between 2013 and 16, together with a transdisciplinary team at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, at the Department of Digital Art, where I'm a researcher and lecturer. And the project's title was Digital Synesthesia. And I will go into the theoretical approach a little bit, but just very briefly. And afterwards, I decided that I will show you maybe just how such a project is being organized and what challenges and problems you have to deal with when producing and exhibiting digital art. I also would like to add that I'm not an expert at all in archiving and preserving digital art. I'm more into media aesthetics. I'm a scholar and into media aesthetics and of digital art. So yes, as I mentioned already, this project went on for 3 years at the Department of Digital Art, which is led by Professor Ruth Schnell. And it was funded by the Austrian Science Fund, which has a special program on artistic research. So as far as I'm informed, not many countries do this have. In Austria, this was a very new program which started around 2012, I think, or 2011, where not only science and humanities are funded before all, but also artistic research. We had, just to abbreviate the whole process, we had 2 exhibitions in the end of the project. One was shown in Vienna and one was shown in Hong Kong, both in 2016. The project lead were myself and Professor Ruth Schnell and Romana Schuler as an art historian. And we had at the end 17 participating artists from all over the world. We worked together with 13 so-called supporting curators, also internationally known and from all over. And which was very interesting, but it was a big challenge also, the transdisciplinarity together with scientists from the really hard sciences like neurology and psychology and so on. So we had as cooperation partners the ZKM in the person of Peter Weibel and the City University of Hong Kong School of Creative Media in the person of the then Dean Jeffrey Shaw. So how did it come to the title? The title is Digital Synesthesia, meant of course, was the putting together of the digital medium or the digital technologies with a phenomenon of perception, which some of you might know already. Regarding statistics, there should be at least 2 or 3 persons in this room who are synesthetes. Any synesthetes here? Knowing synesthetes? Yes? Okay. So approximately 4% of the world population have this special ability of synesthetic perception, which means that perceiving some sensory inputs in one sensory modality is perceived in many sensory modalities, like very well-known artists, for instance, are Paul Klee and Stravinsky, not Stravinsky, Kandinsky, sorry. Kandinsky, who was, when he was hearing music, he saw this music also in colors, and that was what he was painting, and it was similar with Paul Klee and many other artists. in former times, it was addressed as a very more or less weird or almost ill kind of perception. But during the last decade or so, synesthesia has become more and more an aspect of just an intensification, concentration of otherwise normal perception. This is something we all perceive in synesthetic ways. That means we always perceiving in all sensory modalities at the same time. If we see something, we also perceive it with our smelling sense, of course, with our ears and so on. I'm not going into detail now, just to explain why it was called synesthesia. One of the main assumptions of so here you see all the sensory modalities which are involved in synesthetic or in normal perception. And one very important sensory modality is the kinesthetic, the sense of motion. We called the project digital synesthesia because one of the main assumption or the main hypothesis was that due to the binary code, which is unique for digital art, a direct and immediate translation of data, of any data, can be translated or transferred into any medium and sensory output. So you can use the same data to produce like image pixels, or to produce like sound units, or to produce motion units, and so on. And therefore, the programming of algorithms or the program of a network is fundamental for its artistic and aesthetics. So the main assumption was that digital art, due to this binarity or to this basis of a digital code, is able to produce synesthetic experiences to non-synesthetes. This, of course, is a very general assumption, and we did it like this because due to this transdisciplinary team, like with artists, scholars, and scientists, we thought we have to start from a allegedly simple point. And the whole project, of course, was very much focused on the process and the discussions and the process of the mutual discussions and meetings we had all together. So I can't go into detail now with this term of artistic research. You all know about it, of course. There are many discussions going on. What does artistic research mean? We used a couple of research questions which we wanted to work on the artists in the same way as the scientists and the scholars. But of course, the artists, and this is also my opinion, that whatever they do as artists, it's always research per se. It's research not in a scientific way, but of course it's research about the world, it's research about perception, it's research about aesthetics of technology, of materiality, and so on. One of my main parts was, as a media scholar, and this was also a hypothesis, was to find out what are the correlations now between synesthesia as a perception phenomenon and digital art in terms of its mediality and its materiality. And this is just one example where I tried to introduce structural correlations between, for instance, a type of synesthesia which is called auditory visual synesthesia with an artwork which was produced during this project. And I'm not going into detail now, just to show you what was the classic research or media scholarly work in here. But these correlations between perception and a digital artwork was what led us through the whole project all the time. Yeah, I was researching the 16 artworks or 15 artworks in terms of these correlations, in terms of media aesthetics, in terms of metaphors which were going on, the artists used, and so on. This can all be read in our publications. I'm not going into detail here now, just to show you, to give you an idea what was going on the one side of the project. I also can't show you all the 15 projects, but I would like to introduce you to one significant artwork in this, which was developed in the course of digital synesthesia, because for me it's showing a large variety of these aspects of digital synesthesia in terms of the translation of data into sound and into pictures, into images, still images and moving images. The piece is called At Play, and it's by Conditions Plurielles, which is an Austrian-Canadian artists group led by Marie-Claude Poulain and Martin Kusch. And this is also something which refers very, very well to what you have said already, Annette. This artwork has been shown already before in other contexts. It was shown in Montreal, it was shown in I think even at the ZKM and so on, and it's always different. It's always in a different setting. It's in a different context. It's different images used. It's different boxes used, and so it shows very well also the problems of how you can preserve or archive such an artwork in terms of one piece or just one object. So just roughly, as you can see here, I show you a short video afterwards, but just to explain a little bit, it consists of an installation of these Euro boxes, which are gray plastic boxes built as towers and put on the floor in a dark room. And you have some movies projected on these boxes, which show on the one hand refugee camps from TV footage and migrants, groups of migrants walking somewhere in the world, and also animations, digital animations of the boxes themselves. And you as a user can interact now with these boxes. You enter the stage and you take them and you can shift them and you can turn them around and you put them somewhere. And in the moment you're doing this, you're interacting with a very complex interactive system where sound and images are changing constantly in regard to how you and the other users are moving these boxes, how you are moving yourself, your body within the installation. I show you this short video. I hope it works. Yeah, and I think it's about like here. We don't have sound, do we? Sorry, I didn't ask for the sound. Maybe sound there? This one, right? So, as you saw that this artworks is all the sensory modalities and the media modalities, like sound, like image, and so on, they're very, very strongly entangled with each other. The images trigger the sound is changing due to the movements the users are doing. It's also depending on how many users are involved and so on. So this is something which is always completely new. The whole artwork is completely new if you see it in a new context, in a new time, in a new space. But still, there is some concept in it which of course is the one which could be discussed as the one which should be preserved, but we will talk about this a bit later. So just to show you a little bit how this project went on, I will give you an in view into how, in the schedule, more or less, how we did the project, or the main key points we had to do. First of all, we decided that we do not want to be the curators ourselves for the artworks, but we want to have some co-curators. So we invited 13 international co-curators and asked them to suggest 2 to 3 artists who they thought could do an interesting artwork in terms of the digital synesthesia topic. After this, we got 48 recommended artists or artist groups from the curators, and we invited them to apply for a concept, to apply for the project with a concept for the artwork. Then we had a Then, of course, we got a lot of very, very interesting things, everything completely different. We asked them, clearly, we need a budget and all these things, but of course, you know, everybody's doing this differently, so we had to go through all these projects, and we got 24 projects from 20 artists, and we then, as a jury, more or less at the advisory board, we chose 17 artists and with 15 artworks. What were the criteria? This is always so difficult. Of course, there had to be a strong reference to the topic. They had to fulfill this idea of what is digital synesthesia. Then the quality of the artistic concept itself, of course, which is always something you can discuss, but as we were like 5 people, we thought we have to handle it, we have to be able to argument it. Then, of course, we had to look at the artistic research aspect, which I mentioned before. The artistic research aspect is something which is a huge field of discussion itself. Yeah, there were some criteria which had to be fulfilled by the concept. And of course, last not least, the budget and the feasibility, which is also something which very often is not thought of before or not enough, because it always turns out that things are very, very difficult to be materialized or produced. Then we had all these whole legal things, which I don't want to tell you about in detail, but most of you, all of you know, of course, this is also very hard work to do all these contracts, the legal things with the financial department and whatever and so on. So this was something which took quite some time and effort. But then started the real fun. We started with doing expert interviews with the artists, and we wanted to know something about digital, what they understand with the term digital synesthesia, if they ever heard about this expression before, which media they normally use, how they deal with this transfer of sensory modalities, about the materiality, of course, which is a very strong, materiality, of course, has a very strong impact on the sensation of artworks, and so on. And we did these interviews as soon as we could get hold of the artists somewhere around the world. Some of them, or many of them, were able to come to Vienna to take part in a lecture series or artist talks about the digital synesthesia project. So there are just two or three examples, like Tammy Cotil, Alexandre Sedoge, and Jeffrey Shaw. It was important for us that the public, the university public, but also the general public, was involved somehow into the production process. So we got a lot of feedback from the audience and so on, and from the students we got questions. We always could work with all these events we were trying to involve into the project. Then we had a very important thing going on in 2015. We did a transdisciplinary workshop with the artists. We invited them to Vienna, and for 2 days we were working on the one hand on the theoretical concepts of digital synesthesia, but very much also on the what were they doing. They were introducing their concepts again, how far they were with their work. We were discussing it and so on. This was very important to do, to see each other, of course, face to face once in a while, because otherwise we all know that we can, of course, communicate a lot via the digital media, but it's not the same if you're meeting each other. And of course, well, these are the results which also were involved in the next steps. And of course, we did a lot of eating and drinking and talking and laughing, which is also very important. So the sensory aspects, the bodily aspects, to being really together, to talk to each other, to be able to feel, to touch each other, is very important for such a project. This was going on during the whole project, and all of you know, of course, that this is such an important part. How much time have I left?
About 20 minutes.
Ah, great, okay. So then we did, of course, a website. The website was, due to the budget situation, not as sophisticated as we wanted it to have, so we really had to cut it down to a very simple kind of website. I can show you very briefly how it's working. We installed it very early already at the beginning of the project, which means this was already in 2013. And we started with, of course, the whole issue about artistic research. What does it mean? What are the questions? What are the assumptions? And so on. We had a news site, of course, completely clear, where we put on all the latest news all the time. We tried to do a blog there, which did not work because this was too much for us as the website organizers. Plus nobody really, this is also a problem of its own to lead a blog and to really make it interesting. So we just didn't have the time and the resources for this. So we just put on the news. And as art projects, we decided in the beginning already that we put on quite a lot of art projects which were not yet done, just as examples for what we understood as digital synesthesia art. But in the end, of course, if you go there to the filter and you click on digital synesthesia, you will see just the artworks which were produced during the digital synesthesia project. But if you went there, for instance, on one of the projects, like let's say, like Ulla Rauter, which I showed before, then you also see earlier. You can also see earlier works by this artist, just to get this whole connection or understanding of what the synesthetic aspect or the special synesthetic aspect of their artwork is. So let me go back to the slides. So this was the website, and it was continually filled, of course, but not to our full satisfaction in terms of aesthetics and functionality. But it was important, of course, to have this. Oh. So, sorry. This was the something. Okay, here we are. So then, of course, the whole issue of press and PR work, which was also very important. We did radio interviews with the scientists and all these things you have to do to have the public also involved. Yeah. Then we had a very special event also in Vienna. The Vienna Science Ball was installed for the first time in 2015, and it was before all for the universities and the scientific community. But the organizer then already said, yeah, we want to have the artists in it and the art university also. And so the Digital Synesthesia project was invited to represent the University of Applied Arts there. And as you can see, it was just a very tiny thing we could do, but we projected names and small videos and animations on the ceiling of these classicistic ballroom building, and yeah, we could, and together with scientists, we could also introduce the project as an artistic research project. So probably you know that the artistic research or the art, or let's say the relationship between art and science is also a very specific topic, where the art very often has to be strong in its presence, and this is what we try to really present art and artistic research also as a research methodology or a research method. So then, of course, you have to do a lot of networking and presentations and conference participations, which we did also all the time, and a lot of communication. We had this before already. I think, Annette, you mentioned it also, that communication is something that you have to communicate, of course, all the time with the artists. Here, for instance, with Karen Lensel and Herman Matt, who we did a lot of Skype sessions, because you always have to discuss things, and artists very often are also changing their ideas until the last second of the installation of the artworks in an exhibition. They want to change, and you have to stay as an organizer or as a curator. You always have to stay, of course, with them, and you also have to give your feedback if it's feasible or not, and so on. So this is very, very important that you're constantly communicating with each other. Then, of course, the exhibition design is something which is very strongly, which is having a very strong impact on the perception of the artworks. Besides the financial questions, of course, which are always a menace, you have to really deal with this idea of that the exhibition, of course, should be something which is a unique thing itself, which has its own aesthetics, but it has to give room and place to the artworks, of course. So the exhibition design in Vienna and in Hong Kong did Wolfgang Viel, an architect from Vienna who is an expert on exhibition design with so-called poor materials, or arte povera or materiale povere. As you can see, we had this kind of, I don't know the English expression of this wood, which is pretty cheap, and you can build everything with this. We did a model first. We did a paper model where we put all the, of course, the projects in, and probably you also do it similarly or in the same way if you do exhibitions, for instance, here in the museum. Yeah, then we did the setup in Vienna, for instance, which is also something which still has a very strong impact on the, of course, on the final exhibiting of the artworks, because you are completely dependent on the technology, what screens do you get? Do you have to change, I don't know, technology, hardware, because it doesn't really work? What is the power supply? Is there, yeah, as you can see, is there the transportation things? Is everything okay? Is it broken? Whatever. We even had those very simple things, like here you can see Herman Maat helping Jeffrey Shaw with preparing. Jeffrey had to use rubber fingers from the medical, like you use it in medicine, because he used a tongue switch as an interface for his artwork, and so everybody had to get a clean new rubber finger cover. So this was also something you had to do, like to sorting out these things. They sat for like 3 hours doing these things. Yes, then of course we did an exhibition booklet, which was laid out like this on the right side, the tour exhibition guide, which is an important part of the mediation and the art education thing. We worked together with a graphic design office, and of course the booklet in its aesthetics also should refer to the topic synesthesia, which was tried a little bit. You can see it on the left side. The cover was like all the colors like changing in some kind of almost invisibly to each other or into each other. Yes, then we had the opening, of course. The opening itself is also a menace for the artworks every time. You know, people are going there and touching them, and the interaction, the technology or the technical things sometimes then break down or don't really work. People want to know what's going on, but you don't really have an education team already then, and so on. So this is also something which I think is and people are drinking and eating, as you can see. So it's also something which in some way changes the perception of the artworks, of course. We tried to do a lot and intensive mediation education program. We did a lot of guided tours. We had texts on the walls, of course. We had, as long as the artists were at Vienna, we asked them to do guided tours to explain their artworks and so on. And also, every time an artist is explaining their artworks, it's always different. You know, they always put a focus on another thing, referring, of course, and depending on the questions of the audience and so on. Yes, and we also had a symposium, a transdisciplinary symposium, where we finally got the scientists in, because it was really hard to get the scientists into this artistic research project. They are still very how shall I say, skeptical, reserved and skeptical about the research aspect of art. Yeah, most of them still think art is something which has to do the nice pictures and to visualize what artists are doing, but that's it. So, and we had really hard, controversial discussions during the symposium. People crashed into each other, like the one said, perception or something is illusion, and the scientists got completely crazy about it because that's not illusion, and so on. So, but this was really interesting. I think you were mentioning it, the language is something which is really something. Yeah, the language is so important that people know what they are speaking about, they are meaning more or less the same things. You know, I mean, we all know that when we still, as coming from the same zoo, we still don't understand each other so well. But this was really hard. But it was very interesting to have these controversial discussions. Yes, and then we did the exhibition in Hong Kong at Jeffrey Shaw's School of Creative Media. And then we had, of course, completely new challenges to deal with. First of all, the budget, of course, again, and the transportation thing, because the artists took some of the parts of the artworks with them home, and then they had to be sent to Hong Kong. Some of them stayed in Vienna, where we had to send them. Then it was, of course, problematic with the customs and with all these bilateral administration, bureaucratic efforts, and so on. Then the exhibition space, of course, was completely different than the one in Vienna, but we had to use the same material again. And technical problems, because there are different, I don't know, like power supplies and so on. Then, of course, you have to deal with cultural differences in terms of how you deal with the organization, about what is understood by a digital artwork, about the mediation and so on. Also with things like climate, not just in terms of the room climate, which is also a factor which is important for digital art, but also the outside climate, because it makes a difference if you work in a very humid and hot area, or if you're in a cool area, regarding the materials and so on. Yes, so you can see in some of the projects we couldn't really transfer to Hong Kong, so we had to show them only in a video documentary version, which was a pity, but sometimes you just have to deal with this. And yeah, and then of course we did a book where we collected all the where we collected texts from the scientists, the scholars, the artists, and so on. And I think this is really something which is very old school, but still very important, that you keep these things also in a printed version and not just online, which is, of course, another quality. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring a copy. I would have liked to bring you one, but it's sold out right now, and we try to have it reprint again. So what stays at the end? There are staying 15 digital artworks, very, very different from each other. If we have time, I can show you the one or the other afterwards a little bit. But the questions, of course, in this context here is, how are they documented? How and where are they stored? I mean, as I've said before, the artists, okay, thanks, that's perfect. In the contract we did with the artists, they were allowed to take the artworks home and to show them wherever they want, in any context, as long as they are referring to the courtesy of digital synesthesia. And we have the one, if we want to do a show, which we have been planning for quite some long time already in New York and in Canada, but then we can take them first and show them there, but then they can take the artworks home. But what are the artworks? So we here again with the question, what is it, for instance, if like Anke Eckhart here, we built for her some kind of wooden chamber where inside you had just by sound the expression of moving in the world. So the box, of course, stayed in Vienna and was trashed, and she took the concept more or less with her home. So what does this mean now? Where is the artwork, and where is it stored? Where is it archived? Then the question of ownership here, we of course tried to really make this clear from the beginning on. It's the artist's work. The copyrights already is difficult if you're referring to who is doing the photographs, where is it published. If there is something like the ad play I showed you before is co-produced in the future with another institution, so where the copyrights then. Yes, the archiving and preservation is something which I have to admit we didn't really think a lot about it. The artists themselves, of course, did a little bit, but as we thought the whole project as a fluid one, a processual fluid one. So we didn't have the duty, but we also were free of not having to archive or to store them. But I think that's an important thing also. And yeah, so that's the questions which come up, of course, with these projects. And yeah, maybe I introduce just, okay, this is not what I wanted. Maybe maybe this is something also nice. I mentioned it before. It's a project called EEG KISS by Karen Lanston and Herman Matt, which has also been showed before, okay? And in our context, it was shown, and it will be shown in the future, and it's constantly changed. And this also makes it, of course, difficult to talk about preservation. This is a dome installation by Ruth Schnell, which also consists more or less on a hard disk, and depending on which dome it's shown in, it's completely different again. Yeah, as I have only 2 minutes more, I think I will come to an end. Just look up the website or the book. Thank you very much for your